So I'm just going to welcome everybody to this evening's Scrutiny Commission meeting. This is the Skills, Economy and Growth Scrutiny Commission of Hackney Council. I'd like to welcome everybody who is here in the chamber and those watching and listening at home. I'm going to go through the agenda so that you know what is happening when, but there's a little bit of stuff at the beginning before we can get into the meat of the meeting. First of all, I've got members' apologies. Councillor Walker and Councillor Race have both sent their apologies. Councillor Potter, who is the Vice Chair, has sent her apologies for lateness. She will attend soon. We don't actually have any councillors in virtual attendance this time, which is lovely. We have all of our councillors in the room. Do we have any other apologies of note? Good. Urgent items. If we don't have any urgent items, I'm going to run through the order of business. Okay, good. We're going to do this. There's immediate things we've got to do. Is go through the declarations of interest, and then what we're looking at is specifically the issue of. Am I doing this right? Yes, I am doing this right. Just. That's not happening. All right. Okay. We've got this one. Yeah. Yeah. So we've got the full meeting focused on the issue of the library's strategy and the library services review. We'll go to the meat of that in a moment. But first, can I just make sure that we've got the declarations of interest from members of the Commission? Can you use your microphone, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare I'm a member of the Musicians Union, and I was also on the Task and Finish group for this particular item.
Sorry, can you say that again just clearly, because there was a bit of noise in the background?
I'd like to declare I'm a member of the Musicians Union, and I was also on the Task and Finish group for the library's review.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Narcross.
Yeah, I'd just like to declare I'm a member of Unison.
A member of Unison. Any other declarations of interest? Councillor Lynch.
I'd like to declare that I am a member of the Royal College of Nursing and an accredited trade union steward for that union.
Thank you very much. Councillor Premaru.
I'm a member of RMT and TSSA unions.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
I work for the RMT and I'm a member of the GMB.
Thank you. I'd like to declare that I am a member of the GMB and Unite and Unison. Right, so that's all the declarations. The way this meeting is going to run, we've got 4 different presentations. Anyone who has attended any of our meetings before will know that in order to get the best out of the meetings, I'm very, very, very strict on time. Right, so if I've said that you're going to have 10 minutes, you're going to have 10 minutes. Not 9, not 11. If you finish early, that's fantastic, more time for questions, but we don't run over, and I am equally fair to everybody. Remember, some people are also contributing online, virtually, so we need to respect them when they're making their presentations as well, and we will make sure that we have a good opportunity to ask and answer questions. So my proposal is that we start with Libraries Connected making their presentation for 10 minutes. Then we will hear from the Hackney Young Futures Commission, and we will then have an opportunity to ask questions, and that will be the councillors who will ask those questions of Libraries Connected and the Young Futures Commission. Then I'm going to take a presentation from the council and from Unison. And again, those 2 will have no more than 10 minutes each, and then we will ask questions again. And again, the questions come from the Commission. I'm hoping that because we have got an enormous amount of information from the council, and we've already had prior sight of the presentation from the trade unions and also from Libraries Connected, we should have really, really, really good questions and a really, really, really good discussion, and that we can get finished by 9 o'clock. That's my plan. If you would like to help me in my plan, that would be even better. Right, so there's a few little bit more bits and pieces in terms of the housekeeping, because we do hybrid meetings these days. Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. So everything you say will be in the record for the meeting, and people can hear you if they are joining us virtually. Please make sure you don't have your microphone on throughout the meeting, because that ends up, as you know, with the howl round. You'll have had it sometimes when people don't get their microphones right. If you're still getting feedback, turn off other devices just in case. If you'd like to speak, both in the room, please raise your hand. Once I've nodded to you, then hopefully I'll know who you are, and then I'll be able to put you on my list. If you're online, please use the hand raise button, and again, I'll make sure that I've got you on my list. I might not be able to take everybody, but I will try to take you in order. And again, the shorter your contributions, the more people can speak. The chat function is not to be used for conversations with other participants or to provide personal information. So only use the chat function to tell me that you wish to speak if you don't think that I've seen you put your hand up, or to report a technical problem. It's a formal meeting of the Hackney Council. The press may be in attendance. Please bear that in mind, and the rights of the press and the public to record and film the meeting will apply. Does that all make sense to everybody? Yeah, you're all happy with all of that? Good. That makes my life a little bit easier. Okay, so there's a lot of me talking, and I'll stop in a bit. This is really what we're here about this evening. The Library Service Review was first launched in April 2021 by Hackney Council. The review of Hackney Library Services facilitated an extensive conversation about libraries with residents and stakeholders to measure the satisfaction levels of the current service provision and identify the local needs and aspirations of the future of the library service. A new library strategy was developed following engagement with residents, councillors, staff and relevant council departments. Hackney Council's library strategy and associated service transformation vision, objectives and service model was adopted by the council in October 2022 by the Cabinet. Those are the people in charge. This meeting is to review the implementation plan of the library strategy, consider the future plans for library services and the workforce changes. The purpose of this meeting is not to comment on the strategy itself, because that strategy and vision has already been set and formally agreed by the executive. So at this meeting, as I say, we'll hear from Libraries Connected, Hackney Young Futures, Hackney Council and Unison. And again, just for the purposes of, help for the benefit of Polly, who's just joined, I'm very strict on timing. You will only have, I know Petra's doing the presentation, but there will only be 10 minutes for that, and then we'll open up to questions. Okay, so I think we're now in a position to be able to welcome the people in the meeting who are going to be presenting. We have Isabel Hunter, who is the Chief Executive of Libraries Connected. Isabel is joining us online. Then we have the London Borough of Hackney's people who are going to be here, which is Polly Chock, who is in the Chambers, the Strategic Director of Engagement, Culture and Organisational Development. Petra Roberts, who is online, who's the Strategic Service Head for Culture, Libraries and Heritage, and she will be making that presentation. Unison, we have Matthew Paul, the Joint Branch Secretary, welcome, and Brian Debus, the Unison representative, welcome. And then we have Hackney Young Futures, where we have Cherry, Leander, hiya, have I pronounced that right? Great. Castle couldn't come, and Sudanaz. Sudanaz is online, brilliant. Do I have anybody else that I should know about? Mia? Jalen as well, great. Well, make sure, Jalen, if you're online, that you put your hand up if you would like to speak. Also in attendance, but not speaking, will be London Borough of Hackney officers supporting the Hackney Young Futures reps. Sylvia, Reese, and as you said, Mia, yeah. Great. Right, we'll be taking 2 presentations followed by Q&A, as I said, and then we'll take, after the Q&A, we'll do the second 2 presentations. So first of all, part 1, I'd like to invite Isabel Hunter, who's the Chief Executive, to commence the first presentation from Libraries Connected. Isabel, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you. And it's really nice to be here because although I no longer live in Hackney, I was a Hackney resident for 28 years, so it's always a pleasure to be involved in anything to do with Hackney. So I'm the Chief Exec of Libraries Connected, and we're a membership body for public libraries in England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and the Crown dependencies. And we're funded by Arts Council as a sector support organisation. So our main role is to network libraries and to support them around innovation and service development. So we're very focused on what's the next steps for the sector. Where do libraries need to develop? So at the start of the pandemic, we had a recovery model where the fourth stage of the recovery model wasn't to put services back to how they were pre-pandemic, but to stop and look at the changed world around us and to think about the changing needs of library services. So I think we're far enough now out of the pandemic to see some of the patterns of use starting to settle down. I mean, it was interesting to look at the papers for this evening and see how, some of the patterns there in Hackney, how they seem to be mirroring what's happening nationwide. So we've been doing some monitoring of what's been going on in libraries. So although physical footfall is still at about 70%, it's still rising. But interestingly, book lending is back to pretty much what it was pre-pandemic, with digital lending and digital activity a much higher percentage than it was. But the other thing that the main thing that we're really helping libraries think about is the changing needs in their communities and the sharpened needs and sharpened inequalities that happened because of the pandemic. And having lived in, Hackney for such a long time, I know it is a borough that is very focused on inequalities and although it's a borough of great opportunities, of course, for many in the community, those opportunities are sadly lacking. So I think it's very important that libraries really think about how they're playing into that. And again, good to see how that was echoed in the strategy and the ambition of the strategy, and very much fits with some of the research that we've published, some of the research booklets that were circulated before the meeting around libraries and their role in recovery, for example. What we're also very interested in is how libraries deliver, so not just what they do, but how. So we have a concept of the 3-channel library services. So libraries are very important as the physical spaces, and I think we've seen that really, really clearly over the last few weeks with warm winter work of many library services and that chance to be that meeting place for communities and individuals. So the 3 channels are the physical library buildings, digitally, which has taken on a new importance, and then out in communities. So with community library services, mobile library services, and also increasingly partnerships with third sector partners, things like food banks, housing associations, and other ways to get library services out into communities where people need them, rather than just expecting people to come over their doors. We continue to talk about the Universal Library Office as the 4 pillars of what every library should be delivering. So that's work around reading and literacy. I think with a sharpened focus at the moment on children's literacy and literacy recovery and closing that literacy gap that the pandemic has exacerbated. So reading and literacy, health and well-being, again, many health and well-being problems exacerbated by the pandemic and now by the increasing levels of poverty and destitution. Digital and information. So not just making sure that people are digitally connected, but also there's an enormous job, an increasing job around misinformation and disinformation where libraries can play an important role. And finally, culture and creativity. And I think this is really important for a very creative borough like Hackney, and libraries as that gateway for many people to cultural and creative activities. So for us, it's libraries. How can libraries operate through those 3 channels, but also how can they continue to deliver those 4 pillars of what every library should be operating? And in order to do this, of course, new ways of work are necessary. And a really key thing is a skilled and dedicated and very dynamic and flexible workforce, one that can work across branches, that can be deployed to specific projects, and also multi-skilled, with that real skill about engaging with communities at the heart of everything that they can do. And then finally, of course, there's never enough resources to go around, and Libraries Connected, we're very sharply aware of the financial pressure that many councils find themselves in. So innovation in ways of working effectively, so consortia working. So again, things like the Library Consortium that provides really good value in access to books and resources and innovation in how they're provided to people. Things like the Library Consortium and other London network initiatives are really, really important, as are new ways of libraries generating income. So those are some of the sort of headline themes that we're supporting libraries to think about over the next couple of years as we finally emerge from the pandemic. And I think some of that post-pandemic dust has started to settle now.
I'll note that Isabel only took 5 minutes, so we've got more time for questions, hopefully. I'd like to, are there any questions of clarification of what Isabel said? I know the audio is not brilliant to hear in this room, to hear what Isabel's saying over the cameras, but if there is any further questions and clarification, if not, I'm going to move to Hackney Young Futures. Councillor Potter, could you make your declaration of interest before we move on?
I was about to do that.
Great, thank you.
Say apologies for being late, and I'd just like to declare, is that clear enough? I'd just like to declare that I'm a member of the CJC, and we have discussed the libraries at the previous meeting, and also I did attend at least the first task and finish group for members.
Great. Other people have been declaring their interest in terms of being a member of a trade union. Are you a member of a trade union?
I'm a member of Unite.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, well, let's move on and hear now from Hackney Young Futures. Could you tell us a little bit about your perspective when it comes to the library service?
Yep. So we're Hackney Young Futures.
I'd get a little bit closer to the microphone. You move it up. Moves. Move it. Push it.
Don't want to break it.
You really won't.
Okay.
You'll be fine. Go on.
So I'm Mia, and this is Hackney Young Futures. We're just a few members. We're here basically because we do believe that libraries are incredibly important to young people. And I myself, I'm 24, so I do deem myself as young, not so young, not as young as these guys, but yeah, I do deem myself as young. But I personally haven't been to a library in about 7 years, and when I did go, it was quite a hostile environment to walk into. The rules weren't incredibly clear as to whether you could talk, whether you couldn't talk. But in my own personal experience, I went to Hackney Central Library. And when I was there weren't any co-working spaces, which is one of the biggest issues that I found. Because at secondary school, there was a lot of group working, and if I couldn't work at the school, then the library was where I would want to go. And there was absolutely no chance to speak to my peers in there. You would get told off straight away. So that's my past experience. In the future, though, I would want to revisit libraries, but the only reason I wouldn't is because I have a laptop at home, I have Wi-Fi at home. So I would say that I would want to go back to libraries, but I want to go there. I want there to be reasons for me to go there, to engage with my community, to learn new things. I want there to be more events, and I think that also involves a lot more engagement and communications, which there is a lack of, I believe. I personally haven't had any information about events that are going on, and I'm very heavily involved on social media as well. So yeah, I would say those are the things that I would like to see in the future, because I personally would like to go back to libraries.
Thank you very much.
Broken.
No, seriously, have a go.
My name is Thierry. I'm 19, and I've been going to a majority of the Hackney libraries since I was about 10. And my favorite one is the Dalston Library because of the archives. Because I remember when I did my history coursework, I was in there every day until it closed, looking at archives from the Second World War. And it was much of a help to me. And I never found it as a hindrance. I found the staff there very nice. I found the atmosphere nice. I think it's mostly I was on the archives floor, so I was by myself. I wasn't surrounded by other people. But before I talk about the impact it had on me, I'd like to talk about the impact it has on other people that are not generally people you think go to the library. I'm talking about the people that are undocumented. It's the only safe space they've got, especially in hard times in the winter when it's cold. It's the one place you can walk into that's not like a park, that you can get no questions asked. You can sit down, maybe just gather some warmth, gather your feelings and thoughts, and be able to enjoy the atmosphere. And people don't look at the libraries and what that has for other people instead of thinking of young people, young adults, and how do we get more people in. But you look at the people that make Hackney, the people that are working, the people that are struggling, and the impact that has for them. And I think when you look at it, how do we give them that safe space and that safe feeling that most other people don't get?
Thank you very much, Terry.
Hi, my name is Leander. I typically don't, I'm 18 years old, so I'm studying my A levels right now. And I typically don't go to libraries in Hackney just because I think the environments aren't as nice. I think the Dawson one is really nice, but it closes a bit early. And if I'm studying and I want to get like quite a bit of work done, I don't really want to be leaving or being rushed out, I think, at 6 p.m. And I think the Hackney Centre Library does lack that warmth from staff, and you can't really there's not like a lot of co-working space, whereas like for example the British Library, there's quite like longer hours and it's a really nice working environment where you can work with friends and there's no pressure about noise or like certain areas you can't go to. Really, it's quite like a nice environment, I think. So I think for Hackney, I'd want to see more like co-working space and more like a more positive, I think, environment and really nice stuff.
Thank you very much. Sudanaz, I've got your hand raised. Would you like, and then Ceylan. So Sudanaz first and then Ceylan, yeah?
Hi, my name is Sudanaz. I'm 18 years old and I've recently started university. I used Hackney libraries a majority of my secondary school life and my A-level times. And I generally used it because until last year, I used to live in a fairly overcrowded house and didn't really have a space to study silently by myself. This was a problem in the pandemic as well, which made me value libraries even more. And I just wanted to bring some attention to those like young people who live in overcrowded housing, because libraries in Hackney may be their only place to study. And whilst I had positive experiences studying in the libraries, as the others said, there was a lot of negative experiences from staff as well. But Hackney libraries do matter a lot. They are very important to us, especially us young people who have many siblings and have to share our study spaces. But I agree with everything that my colleagues have said as well. That was the one thing that I wanted to bring attention to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sudanaz. And Ceylan, have I pronounced your name right, Ceylan?
It's Jaylan.
Ceylan, sorry.
Yeah,
Do you want to?
no worries.
Do you want to put your camera on so that we can see
Oh,
you?
one sec. Hello.
Marvelous. We can see you now. Lovely. Nice to
Hi.
welcome, Ceylan. Tell us what you think.
Yes. So I'm 23 and I've been using libraries in Hackney since I could read. I participated in the summer reading challenges and things like that. I have been to like
Sorry,
Clapton,
Ceylan. Could
Hackney
you try
Central.
again? We've lost your picture.
Hello? Hello?
That's better.
Oh, it's because I think I'm looking at my notes, so it will turn off. I hope that's okay.
Okay, well, you stick with your notes. Your notes are more important.
Yeah.
Go on. We know what you
Okay.
look like when you'll write you there.
Yeah. So yeah, and Clapton Library and also Tower Hamlets libraries. And I think they're not only just a place to study, but a meeting place and somewhere to socialize and access information. I was also part of the Young Readers Book Club. I think it was at Hackney Central Library with Linda, and it was a great way of like making connections with other young people and attending like writers workshops and things like that with like I think Michael Rosen did one, and I think Benjamin Zephaniah gave like a poetry reading. So those kinds of things I'd like to see more of. I think they've kind of slowed down, and especially since after COVID, there aren't that many workshops that I've noticed that are on that I think would really help engage young people with libraries more. And also, like, I've noticed that Tower Hamlets libraries do a lot of like free courses, and you can like hire spaces for free. And I don't think any libraries do that enough. Like, I know there's a meeting room in CLR James, but it tends only to be used for professional purposes and not often. And also, like, if there were private study booths, like in my university library, I think that would be quite helpful when studying. Yeah, and that's all I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Traylan. Brilliant. You know what? We're completely sticking to time. Were you going to say something? Go on.
If I can just add a couple of things. My name is Sylvia, and I'm one of the officers from Hackney Council working on Hackney Young Futures. And just to make a connection to what the Commission published with its outcome recommendations, is libraries were one of the most important places that young people put forward as wanting to hang out, as wanting to have intergenerational activities with, and as part of that, Hackney Young Futures, in that sense, supports the changes to make and the spirit of the strategy to make libraries more accessible, and would like to be, the ethos of Hackney Young Futures in that sense is to be part of, to ensure that young people are part of the decision making and the planning and designing of those spaces.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I'm going to turn to the Commission now and see what questions they have for both Isabel from Libraries Connected and from our contributors from Hackney Young Futures. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the co-working spaces that you mentioned, I think it was mentioned twice. What kind of thing are you kind of trying to express there? Because a co-working space is essentially, it's a place where people from different people from different backgrounds can come and share their expertise and explore new ideas. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of?
Yeah, so essentially I meant more so like the things that you see in WeWork, so the booths that I think Jaylan or Susan has mentioned, so co-working booths or just smaller rooms that groups of pupils can gather in and stuff like that. Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Narcross.
Yeah, so this is kind of to any of you, all of you, particularly those of you who said you sort of don't really use Hackney libraries anymore, or have done in the past, or tend not to go to them instead of going to other places. What would make you go back? What do you think is kind of missing that that you would like to see there? So say I hypothetically put you all in charge of our libraries. What would you put in there that you think would bring more young people through the door?
I would say like design, I think, and maybe like aesthetic, if that makes sense. I think it's really important to have a comfortable, warm environment that you want to study in. And I think, like we said, co-working space, and a space where you can study with your friends and you don't feel like, you have to be like deadly quiet or anything like that.
Susan has raised her hand. Susan, would you like to answer that question as well? And then Chaylan.
Yes, so I would say that a lot more study spaces as well, even if it's like individual study spaces, because a lot of the time when I used to go to Hackney Central Library after school, it would be packed. Like there would be no way that I could find a place to study individually, because obviously it would be one person at one desk after 5 p.m. maybe. So especially around exam periods as well, it would be great to have more study spacing. And also, I would say the staff too, because I sort of got drifted away from the Hackney libraries, specifically Hackney Central, when I started to have like really bad experiences with certain staff. And a lot of the time, I hadn't even done anything wrong. And as Mia had said, the rules weren't very specific. Like I didn't know if I could talk. I didn't know if I had to be completely silent. A lot of the time I would be like whispering to my friend to ask for paper or a pen or something like that. And once I even got kicked out for that, which was just insane. But yeah, definitely just study spaces and maybe improve the staff culture type thing. But yeah.
Thank you, Susan. Chaylan.
I'd also include security guards to the staff as well. And sometimes like the way the security guard behaves can be really inviting or not, especially to like large groups of school children in uniform. And I'd also say that I know I use the Libby app, like the library app online, use ebooks. So I think you don't always have to access the library in person to benefit from the library services. So I'd add that as well.
Thank you very much, Helen. Go on.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I know that back in the day, libraries used to be seen as more cultural hubs. So maybe seeing more, I don't know, more activities to do for not just young people, but people who are between the ages of 18 to 25 and plus. Just maybe like creative workshops and movie nights or something creative like that. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more that can be done. They're such versatile environments. So I would say those kinds of things.
Thank you. Thierry?
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I don't think people forget that the creative arts people really cannot use the library, because if they're doing music tech or doing like a massive art piece, there's not enough space to do it in the library. So they're stuck to doing it at home or in maybe staying after school. So to have like a space for music and the creative arts in the library would also be a benefit as well.
Thank you, Thierry. I think I know the Commission is going to ask some questions about how libraries can be more flexible to meet changing needs. But I'd like to follow up with that with Isabel, because we noticed one of the things you said in your report, Isabel, is the increased need. I mean, it might have been that people were previously coming to the library simply to borrow books, but now they're coming to get advice. Sometimes the kind of advice that they might previously have got from formal advice centres, but they want to know how to use a comparison site on the internet or whatever. How has that changed what the service offer should be of libraries in those circumstances?
Yes, this is a really important role of libraries. There was a Ipsos Mori poll last year of trust in different professions. Nurses were, I think, 98%, librarians 96%. So they were the second most trusted group. Sadly, politicians, I think, were further down the list. So I think that trust is really important. So people trust coming into a library, asking for advice. They trust the advice they're given. They trust the signposting they're given. So I think library staff being supported so that they can both give advice and also signpost advice. Yeah, and it can mean that thinking about changing spaces. So a lot of libraries have now invested in little booths where two people could sit, or small little rooms inside the bigger space. So there's spaces for confidential discussions and conversations. And I think that whole discussion about workspace is really interesting, because again, looking at some recent library designs, I've really thought about how you make that space more flexible. How do you have shelving that can move out of the way to create performance space, for example? How do you have partitions that you can move around to create group meeting rooms or small meeting rooms? There's lots of libraries now have these quite cute little booths where one or two people can sit in there. You could have your Zoom meeting in there or do some quiet work on your laptop. So I think that's really important. I think it's also really interesting to see in some libraries, like Islington Library, just down the road from you, where they have sort of re-embraced the traditional library reference room. So the room where old chaps will go and read the newspaper all day. In Islington, they've refurbished that. It's beautiful, beautiful workspace now. Every desk has got a lamp and a power socket. So it's full of people of all ages, lots of younger people working in there, studying in there. So I think it's thinking creatively about the space that libraries have. And the good news is that library designers are really on the front foot with that and coming up with some really interesting solutions on how you can use space and use flexible furniture and partitions to make more sense of that.
And what implications does it have for the changing nature of the workforce that you need to support a different kind of library service or deliver a different kind of library service?
I think, and again, it's really interesting listening to the young people there, because they're giving a really clear message about what they want there is engagement, real meaningful engagement with people in library services. So I think there's been a gradual change from thinking about skills-based recruitment to now thinking more about the sort of attitudes and aptitudes people have. So some very interesting work in places like Manchester, where they're now doing a whole different way of recruiting in communities. They have open evenings. They invite people along who might be interested in the library. And what they're looking for there is not people's experience or people's skills, but they're looking for how good are these people at engaging with others. Do they want to kind of help people? Are they problem solvers? Are they interested in having really flexible jobs where they'll be working across a range of fronts? So I think the sort of spec for a library assistant or library staff is changing, because you still do need qualified professionals in the workforce in that mix, qualified librarians and information professionals, but it's a much wider mix of people. And I think those frontline library staff, the recruitment there is really interesting, and it can be, a really dynamic and exciting career for those who love engaging with other people and sort of being part of community.
Thank you, Isabel. Are there any further questions from the Commission? Councillor Potter.
It's really interesting to get your feedback and to kind of hear what you kind of would make you want to use a library much more. Well, the value you get out of libraries now, but also how it can become much more useful. I was wanting to put to Isabel, would you have any feedback on any other groups like older communities in terms of, just from your perspective? I know the council has got lots of feedback from different groups, but I just wondered whether you would have any comments on some of that flexible working, or additional resource you think that we could benefit all the groups, non-groups. I know particularly because of social isolation, but other aspects too. So just wondering what thoughts you might have. But I know will come up in later sessions.
Isabel.
Great, yeah, thank you. Really, really important question. Obviously, we've got an ageing population, and again, libraries can make really important contributions here to support people to have healthy and active lives as they age, which and obviously that the council's got a great interest in keeping older residents healthy and well. So the home library service, or I think how do you call it, the community library service, is really important. And I think that really strong evidence during the pandemic of what a lifeline that was. And it wasn't just about the books and resources that kept people busy. What we heard from users of those services across the country was it was a human contact, and that very bespoke level of support they had from the library. Which again could often pick up when people were starting to struggle with other things at home. So lots of stories about the home library service then alerting other services or putting them in touch with other areas of help. So I think home library service remains really, really important way of connecting people. It's really great though to see libraries developing a really great range of events for elder people. So things like knit and natter groups, really popular. That they often appeal to older ladies. So libraries are also thinking about what could appeal to older gentlemen. So things like one library saw that loads of guys were coming in to read newspapers. So now they have a weekly newspaper discussion session, which is, cups of tea and coffee. The chaps are now all talking and debating and making friends. Men's sheds movements is really important. So sort of creative craft-based activities for men. Again, that then helps forge those social connections. Manchester libraries are doing really great work about active ageing sessions for older people. So if you look at what they're offering, they've got stuff on their website, and it's about fun and excitement and coming and letting your hair down. And I think they have certain afternoons in the week in different libraries where they've sort of market it as their active ageing sessions. And that's included things like getting more comfortable seating, so older people feel welcome to come in and stay and hang around a bit longer. Also things like film screenings and other sessions where content might be more appealing to older people. So I think it's, I think the challenge for the library services as a universal service, it's there to support every segment of the community. So it can be very challenging thinking about programming and how to stretch our resources so there is programming that will suit the needs of all the different communities. But I definitely think that while young people are one really important audience segment that needs careful thinking about, I think the older and the growing older population, again, equally important that libraries think about sort of bespoke or specialist programming that will support them and appeal to them. I'm sorry, the other thing, of course, is volunteering. But often library volunteers, the age group is older, and then, all the benefits that come with active, all the social and psychological and health benefits that come with with active volunteering are really, really important.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Councillor Premru and then Councillor Potter. Unless Councillor Potter, was yours a follow-up?
Very quickly, just
Go
wanted
on,
to
Councillor, go on.
just wanted to comment that obviously a lot of the suggestions that Isabel made is about much more active kind of conversation, dialogue. So what you were saying about not necessarily to be quiet, but you know, about sharing, co-working, all that kind of thing. So it's the same kind of thing. It's about coming together and talking and discussions of finding places in libraries. That happens both for you and for other groups.
At the same time, Sudanaz
At the
needs
same-
somewhere really quiet to study because she
I
can't
know,
get anywhere
yeah.
quiet to study at home. And I feel for Sudanaz and many others for whom literally libraries are the only place where they can get their stuff done. Councillor Premru.
Thank you, and thanks very much for the report, and also to Hackney Futures. Very interesting about social isolation mentioned in the report, and what we need to do increasingly as people have been quite isolated with the pandemic and lockdown, and Hackney Futures talking about safe spaces as well and inclusive spaces. And so the question is also alongside that of helping people who might have been excluded, have got behind with the pandemic and lockdown with maybe job applications and so on, and what we can do increasingly, whether people are using libraries to help with CVs and access into work.
Who's that for, Councillor Premru?
Well, if Isabel could come in on that, but I was also curious to know if anybody from Young Futures also has
Shailen
experience.
would like to answer that. Shailen, do you want to go before Isabel, and then it gives Isabel an opportunity to think? Go on.
Yes, I was actually thinking that it would be good to partner with organisations like Inter University. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. They have like satellite locations in Haggerston and one in Hackney Downs. And I think they would be able to help with things like CV and one-to-one support like that. Because I know librarians are busy and it's not really their role. Yeah.
Thank you. Isabel.
Yeah, it's definitely a big role that libraries can play in this, and the partnership working is often the way forward to bring in those expert partners into the library venue to bring expert help to people. So there's really good examples across the country of libraries, for example, supporting people back into employment. Many libraries have got in partnership with the British Library, have an information and intellectual property right, the BIPC. Business information, sorry, I can't quite remember what it is, but it's a unit that is focused on helping people set up businesses and set up thriving businesses, and that can often include mentoring, one-to-one support. Other libraries run a lot of support around back into work with job clubs and CV sessions and so on, and access to those resources. So yeah, I do agree. It's a place where many people naturally look to for that help. And if there are ways of the library being a gateway to those services, bringing them in through partnerships, I think that can be really powerful.
Thank you. Any further questions from the Commission? Okay, well, I would like to thank you very much. They were fantastic contributions. I'd hope you'd be able to stay for the rest of the discussion, because I think you'll hear more about how people have made decisions in relation to some of the things that you've raised, and it may well be help further with some of the discussions about how this strategy gets delivered on. However, if you don't want to, you're very welcome to leave, because I know people have lots of other things to do apart from go to meetings in the evening, apparently. Anyway, right, we're now moving on to hear from from Hackney Council and then from Unison. Let me just make sure that I've got the right piece of information in front of me. First, we will hear from Petra Roberts, who is joining us virtually. Petra, who is a Strategic Service Head for Culture, Libraries and Heritage. Petra, you have a presentation, is that right?
That's correct, Chair, yes.
Great. If you can stick to 10 minutes, that would be marvellous. And then I will, is it Matt, are you going to do the presentation? Great, so we'll do 10 minutes from Petra and then 10 minutes from Matt. Thank you.
That's great, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm Petra Roberts.
I think it might be a good idea if you got your microphone a little bit closer to your mouth, Petra. It's a little bit distant, but it might be something Mario can help with. Try that.
Is that much better? Can you hear me?
A little bit, yeah.
That's a little bit better. Okay, brilliant. What I'm just going to do very quickly is maybe just change my settings on the audio. Okay, I think this is a bit better. So I'm going to share my screen. Just bear with me, please, for the presentation. And I hope you can all see this. So as I said, I'm Petra Roberts. It's very good to hear from everyone tonight. And I'm going to provide a 10-minute overview of the new library strategy for Hackney. And this is a clearly stated vision for what the library service is going to achieve in the future. And it responds directly to what residents told us they wanted for their libraries. As Councillor Billington mentioned, in April 2021, the Council launched a comprehensive service review of our library service to co-design a new vision. And this was the first review of our libraries in a very long time. And over the 18 months that followed, we engaged residents, library staff, and many more stakeholders in an extensive libraries conversation. We launched an engagement campaign called Our Libraries, which reached more than 8,500 residents who told us what they would like to see from their library service in the future. We worked with the consultation team and used a wide variety of tools to reach residents from all ages and backgrounds. So we had surveys put out with focus groups, telephone conversation, and housing service to reach everyone. On this slide, you'll see a breakdown of users and non-users we spoke to, and there's a detailed consultation report available online. And over 1,200 pupils took part in the schools competition. So I just wanted to show this slide. We organized a competition to create a poem, a poster, or a piece of art. Or in the instance of Clapton Girls School, they created 3D library design models to share their ideas on what Hackney's libraries could look like in the future. And in the next slides, I've picked some images and quotes from our residents that I think tell the story for Hackney's library's vision and bring it to life. What I'm about to tell you is the full impact that libraries can have on our residents above and beyond books. The power of the community hub means that residents are able to socialize, take part in creative activities, and meet their friends in a really friendly and welcoming space, such as the library, tackling loneliness, reduced health, and social isolation. Our libraries provide a fundamental access in society to high quality information and lifelong learning, and they aim to celebrate the cultural heritage of all our local people. Our libraries are one of the most trusted and safe spaces for communities. They provide a sense of belonging and the opportunity to network with others. And our libraries provide plenty of spaces with big rooms and lots of desk and study space, nicely lit, pleasantly warm, a space for academic inquiry to help fulfill your potential. This is something that I just wanted to put into context for the new strategy. So the co-design vision with residents also involved an inclusive engagement process with all our library staff, as well as cross-council officers and a task and finish group of councillors who have provided excellent advice and ideas for the strategy. And really, it's an investment in people. We understand the crucial role libraries play in supporting the post-COVID recovery. And so we're really giving it a focus on addressing inequalities and economic recovery, enabling social mobility, and also collaboration, which is a key theme of our new vision. This means we'll work in partnership with residents and local organizations who will influence our future approaches. And the implementation of that strategy requires a redesign of the service within the available resources so that it can remain sustainable. And so we're investing in service development and a fit for the future workforce. We also require to meet our agreed corporate savings for this year. And the council has made a commitment to residents to keep library sites open and opening hours unchanged. And this means that the savings can only be achieved through the reorganization of the workforce. I also wanted to mention Shared Intelligence, which is a public policy organisation, which have produced a Hackney usage report. And that was a really interesting report with statistics and data on how the service is being used, as well as how it compares in terms of finance and usage with neighbouring boroughs. And interestingly, Hackney's total revenue expenditure is above the national average and above average of its statistical neighbours. And although this translates into good visits and active borough numbers, The report also notes that it would be useful for the borough to compare itself with other authorities who are outperforming them, so yet by spending less than Hackney. And what can make this service outstanding is a really strong set of outcomes that can meet the demands of our residents now and in the future. So you will have the detail of the overall commitments to those outcomes in the full report, but this slide consolidates a new set of 8 outcomes for our residents. And we use the government's National Universal Library offer as a local strategic tool to ensure that the service meets the outcomes of a very comprehensive and efficient service. But the fundamental mission for the service is to put our libraries at the heart of the cultural life in the borough and help fulfill the potential of every person in Hackney, wherever you are on your journey. And I also wanted to provide a few examples on this final slide on how we are starting to implement the strategy and what success for the library service specifically in Hackney might look like. We know how important digital inclusion is for our residents and for our staff, and for everyone to have really good access to digital resources. And we're tackling this with our digital transformation pilot. Over the past 10 months, we worked with our ICT teams and have really improved the core infrastructure. So for example, we've hardwired almost all our library sites, and as a result have faster Wi-Fi, the public printers are working, and the staff phone systems are back working more effectively. We recently received funding to purchase assistive technology, making all our libraries truly inclusive for those with hearing and visual impairments. We will also be rolling out digital skills training for staff and are offering free training for community members. And that's in collaboration with the Adult Education Service and the Digital Buddy Scheme. Long term, the new vision will only be achieved if we put the right conditions in place. And this includes ideas for new types of services. So we've teamed up with Adult Education in the pilot to promote new lifelong learning hubs and libraries. And we've also increased the educational sessions that they provide to around 350 classes over the past 10 months to reach those in need. So some of them also address, as we mentioned earlier, increasing employability skills like writing CVs, English and numeracy skills, and so forth. But also libraries are now part of the key arts and cultural events programme in the Hackney calendar. And we are planning to co-locate and create a new partnership for our community library service, which you mentioned earlier. We want the community library service to work closely with the adult social care team to really maximise the reach and support independence for older residents with care needs. Another good example is a recent collaboration teaming up with the Fair Money Advice charity to provide free money and debt advice. And we signed up all our libraries to take part in the Warm Spaces campaign over the winter. And particularly the free coat scheme and the coffee mornings have been really popular with residents. And we were also able to keep Hackney Central Library open between Christmas and New Year, thanks to our amazing library staff. And secondly, we will also be simply doing more of what we do well. So for example, putting on more activities for children and families, and we will pilot keeping libraries open for longer hours into the evening, so that we can really extend the study and co-working space provision for our young people. So it's really good to hear from young people today as well. And very recently, we were successful just before Christmas in raising funding for a range of libraries improvements. So one of it is the creation of a new outdoor community garden for families, where we'll be using the derelict car park at Stamford Hill Library to turn it into a really vibrant community outdoor space as part of the library. And the funding will also be used to create digital and creative maker spaces in our libraries. And we want to build a new meeting room that will be available for community hire at Hackney Central. So essentially, we want to provide a core library offer across all our sites that will retain a very high level of quality and accessibility. And we want to co-design our capital redesign of spaces in the future with young people and users alike. And finally, when we spoke to library non-users, they wanted better promotion of the offer across all our sites. And I think it will be the responsibility of the new engagement and development team structure in libraries that will develop a new brand and communication strategy, which clearly sets out a production of targeted newsletters, building on our social media. We'll install digital display boards so residents can really see what's out on offer, not only what's on offer in our libraries, but also connecting to other council services. Fundamentally, there are opportunities to inspire, innovate, and encourage more local people to take up a broader service offering as part of an overall more inclusive approach. And we want to provide really innovative, flexible, and inclusive spaces for our residents of all ages to come together and really grow their cultural experience. So this is it for me in a nutshell. Thank you for listening, and I'll just hand back over to the chair.
Thank you very much, Petra. Really appreciate that. Are there any questions or for clarification from the Commission before we take our next presentation? Right, we'll go to deeper questions later, but thank you very much, Petra. The next presentation is from Matt. Matt, let me just make sure that I've got all my details in front of me. Yeah, Matt Paul, who is the Joint Branch Secretary of Unison, is that right?
Correct.
Thank you very much, Terry. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Matt, if you'd like to start. Thanks.
Fantastic. And I hope it doesn't count against my time, but just wanted to congratulate our younger friends over here for doing a fantastic presentation. I hope I managed to speak with as much confidence as they have tonight. Right, so first of all, thank you for letting us come along, share our concerns with the Commission. It's great to engage with our elected councillors directly, and I know that there is concern amongst our backbenchers as well about what's happening at the moment. I understand the Commission wanted to hear from us about a bit of background about staff engagement with the strategy. Thank you, Tracy. So staff did have some sort of limited involvement with the wider review that included the public consultation. There was also a staff survey, which a lot of staff took part on. However, it was heavily focused on sort of operational problems, day-to-day issues, that sort of thing, and not really their views on what the staffing structure should look like or any kind of changes as a result. Management did share themes from the review with the unions before publishing the strategy. And unions and staff more broadly are supportive of measures to increase usage of our libraries. For instance, as Petra's already mentioned, improving connectivity, better focus on events in our space as well. There was a staff away day in last summer, which did broadly explore service improvements. Staff had workshops getting together, looking at how they can do things differently, and also to sort of achieve this culture shift, which I think our younger friends were talking about as well, that they would like to see. But crucially, all the relevant details of the kind of sort of meat and the bones sort of thing, the job cuts, grades, job changes, responsibilities, that sort of stuff, none of that was really shared with the staff or the unions until the sort of consultation really began in September. Looking at the actual restructure proposals themselves, they take almost £500,000 a year out of the staffing budget, which is a huge chunk. It includes £145,000 more savings than is actually required corporately. There's also an additional £50,000 which bumps up senior management pay, which is coming off the wider staffing cuts year on year. The proposals themselves, they include deleting 99 library staff jobs, cutting the equivalent, full-time equivalent of 19 posts, which is about a third of all full-time jobs in the service. But given the number of part-time staff in the service, it could be as many as 44 staff losing their jobs. That was in the draft proposals. However, since we know that a number of colleagues have requested voluntary redundancy, it's actually more than that 19. It's in the high 20s, although we don't have an absolute confirmed figure. And even then, compulsory redundancies are still very much a threat, and they're on the table as we speak, which is something we are fighting against. Whilst uplifting the pay grades via new library officer posts, they will be expected to all be doing supervisor level tasks, such as opening and closing libraries, cashing up, and that sort of thing. And we know that this might represent an opportunity for some colleagues. Other colleagues don't want that responsibility, and they are sort of being forced into it or forced out ultimately. There's removal of set break times. Library managers won't be responsible for one site, but they'll instead be covering sort of a pool of sites, up to 3 sites, which means in effect there won't be a responsible manager present at all times. It will fall on colleagues on a scale 6 grade. Colleagues will be expected to move between different sites instead of being currently largely assigned to a particular library. New rotas are being introduced to include mandatory regular Sunday working. And for a lot of colleagues, they can't cope with that sort of unsocial work. They have caring responsibilities. They don't want to do that, working on Sundays, even if it is just 1 in 7 weeks. Further increasing the use of relief staff in the service. This was designed as a stopgap to help cover kind of staff absences here and there. And yet over the years it's proliferated, and I'll talk about that in a little bit further. Includes minimum security, includes security guards in the minimum staffing numbers, even though they won't be present during all opening hours. So it kind of breaches their own kind of minimum staffing numbers, which is bizarre. It's worth noting that the workforce, it is older workforce, 69% over 45 years old, largely female, 66%, racially diverse, 60% Black and global majority. And we know from our own membership, which covers the majority of staff, 55% are Hackney residents themselves. They're members of this community. So this will have a disproportionate effect and affect local people as well.
Matt, just a reminder, you're halfway through. I just wanted to make sure, because I know that you've got lots more slides.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try and be quick. Right, relief workers. I think this is something that's kind of like gone under the radar for quite a while. So as I said, this was designed to kind of cover as a stopgap for staff absences, but it's proliferated over recent times. When I raised this libraries item at the CJC, the Council of Potter was at, I was chastised for using the phrase 0 hours contracts, comparing them to 0 hours contracts. But here you can see that actually 0 hours contracts, even they have more rights than our relief workers do. And comparing it to permanent staff, to get all of those contractual benefits, you know, it doesn't really, you know, it's not something that we should be using very widely. And yet, relief workers are frequently covered over 1,000 hours per month. That's the equivalent of 8 full-time jobs. It highlights how the service is already understaffed, and that's before any kind of cuts happen. Management, I think, will point to relief staff covering absences, especially sickness cases and high sickness levels in the service. But yet reducing the workforce so drastically means that absences will have a disproportionate impact on the service, isn't it? So it achieves the opposite of what they wanted to. In terms of staff reaction, Unison anonymously surveyed all staff within the service, which we had a very good response rate. It showed the main concerns were job losses, working below minimum staffing levels and all the health and safety impacts that represents, lack of direct assimilation into the new jobs, and the inability to continue providing services at the current levels. There was a feeling that the sums were being cut far too much, and they also wanted to see staffing cuts avoided at all costs, coupled with keeping the current scale 4 posts, which is what most of the library assistants are at, for job security, and possibly introducing a great career grade system to allow for that career development that some colleagues do want. In terms of the alternative ideas, we've put forward a number of things. So like, as we said, introducing a career linked grade to allow those development opportunities, but also protecting colleagues in their current role. Recruiting to the new development team post, perhaps in a first phase of the restructure, and then looking at the wider restructure later on. That time would allow us to rebuild the usage and recover from COVID and the cyber attack, which has hit libraries hard, and the user numbers as well. We're also just running a pilot on the reduced staffing numbers to see if it's sustainable and if this model holds up. In the meantime, we've mentioned senior management could use the council's reserve funds. General reserves, £168 million at the end of March 2021. That's an increase of £7 million from the previous year. Some of that could be used to buffer some of the corporate savings that are being required. That's a huge amount. Hackney has choices. And yet all alternatives that we've put forward have either been overlooked or dismissed out of hand without real exploration or discussion. And the outcome of that is that the final report is almost identical to the draft proposals, bar a couple of small limited changes. And it's concerning that even before this commission's had an opportunity to look at the strategy and scrutinise that, the crucial workforce strand of that, underpinning it, is already being fast-tracked and implemented literally as we speak. Next slide, please. Thanks. Obviously, we've been pressuring the council on the public campaign. Okay, thank you. Pressuring the council on the public campaign, and one of the justifications came out fairly recently in October was that we need these savings to help pay for Stoke Newington improvements. And yet, here's a press release from 2020 before the library's review was published, showing that that money was already earmarked for those improvements. So that we just don't believe that is valid. The next couple of slides just show broadly the kind of the public campaign, how we've engaged with the public. Our public petition is now almost 2,800 signatures and rising every day as we speak. It is capturing the community's heart. They do realise that this is a real kicker if this happens, and what the impact could be for their services. The next couple of slides again show our campaign, so I'm just going to skip through that. There is a bit of a speech of Diane Abbott MP supporting us at our demo, which was fantastic, but I'm guessing we're not going to have time to show it now.
Very well,
No,
you have a choice, you or Diane. It's up
I
to
will
you.
conclude instead. Sorry, Diane. Right, I mean, so, and what's not as part of this report is, unfortunately, we've been pushed into carrying out a strike ballot with our members, and colleagues have voted to take strike action, the first time in over a decade. We don't do this very often, and this shows you the strength of feeling. I mean, echoing comments from our younger friends that were here earlier, unions and staff also want to see innovation improvements to the vital public service to best protect its future and deliver a professional service for the community. But these deeply disruptive proposals are unsustainable. They will put staff and users alike at greater safety risk, financially unsound, could well lead to temporary or even permanent site closures in the near future. We are scared that we will see a clean sweep of existing staff, losing that knowledge, experience, and that community trust that colleagues spoke about earlier. Management must meaningfully engage with the unions throughout all of these sorts of measures, respect our collective bargaining rights, and be prepared to negotiate in order to better protect job staff safety and well-being and the service itself. And just the final point, I mean, this does feel like a line in the sand moment for Hackney. That if we simply just pass the cuts forward under some sort of austerity 2.0, then the unions are prepared to fight them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was helpful and kept time, which is also excellent. So I'd like to open up for questions from the Commission to both Petra and indeed Polly from Hackney Council and Matt. And Brian, are you happy to take questions as well?
Yes, definitely.
Great. Okay. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you to Petra and to Matt for their presentations. And my question is, and I guess either Polly or Petra could answer this, and it's in light of hearing the evidence from Mia and the other members of the Hackney Young Futures, is around what the strategy plans are for the future workforce to ensure that our library services and our workforce particularly reflects the residents of which we serve, and it becomes more inclusive given the evidence that I've heard tonight.
Polly, do you want to use your microphone, please? It's the button with the hand, not the green button. It's very odd.
Thank you. Okay. So I think it's really important that we do develop the workforce. It's really important to us and has been throughout this whole process that we value and maintain the diversity of the workforce, which is why we've worked really, really hard with staff throughout the process to ensure that they feel confident to apply for jobs in the new service, because the staff that stay in the service will be on higher graded jobs, and that's a great opportunity for them. So we've worked with an external EDI consultant who's worked really closely with a group of staff to co-produce the recruitment process into these roles so that people can feel a really high degree of trust and confidence, and all those kind of processes that were really worrying to them that might have taken place in other library service restructures in the past and other recruitments have been taken out of it. So it's been very, very much co-designed. But it is really important that if we are to meet the needs of our community, and I think this is really reflected in what our Young Futures colleagues said, that we change the culture in the service. It's very rules-based. It's very rigid. Part of what we're trying to do with the new structure is to distribute leadership across it, which is why we've made the minimum grade in the scale 6, so that every member of staff has a certain level of responsibility, is able to take on a leadership role within that library. And you know, it's not hierarchical, so the staff in the new structure will have a lot more professional autonomy, which I think will be really helpful to them in terms of that culture change. One of the commitments we've made to staff, because in the staff engagement we did, lots of staff told us that they felt that there wasn't enough space for staff development, there wasn't enough space for training. One of the first things they said was, in the old days, we used to close the libraries every so often and have a staff away day. Can we do that again? That's one of the first things we did. Didn't do it as quickly as we would have liked because it was in lockdown again, but we managed it this summer. One of the things we've committed to is 4 development days a year. So we'll shut the libraries to the public for 4 days a year, which we will completely devote to getting the staff together, developing their skills, working on that culture change, allowing them to share skills and ideas with each other. And I think that's the way that we'll change the service going forward and make sure that the new workforce have the skills they need to provide the services that our residents want.
Thank you very much, Polly. Councillor Premier would like to follow up, and then Councillor Potter.
Thanks very much. Yeah, a follow up on that is about diversity in the workforce, but also how libraries attract and retain young people in the workforce. I had a question about the apprenticeship scheme, which is very welcome, but does that lead to a permanent post at the end of that apprenticeship? And also, given that it's sometimes less attractive for young people to work on social hours and maybe 7-day work, including Sunday working, how do we attract and retain young people to the library workforce?
Well, the library service is a 7-day-a-week service, and so people, people working in it, and you've again hearing from our Young Futures colleagues, those Sundays where they can come in and study, those evenings are really, really important. So I think that's always going to be part of it. With regards to the Sunday working, we have said that it will be a maximum of 1 Sunday and 7 to staff, and I think it'll end up, 1 Sunday and 7, and probably less, because some of our staff have said that they would prefer to work more weekends because it allows them to save money on childcare during the week and all of that kind of thing. In terms of young people, we've built 4 apprentices into the new structure. It's the first apprentices the library service have had for a very long time, and we are going to develop those apprentices as a cohort, so they'll be reporting into the development team under Emma, so that their skills will be grown together as a group. Whether or not they end up moving into the service in the longer term, I expect some of them will and some of them won't, because some of them might want to go and work in neighbouring boroughs, some of them might stay with Hackney Libraries forever, some of them might go into other parts of the council, they might go into archives and heritage. We want to make their skill set as broad as possible. Some of them will want to be information and library professionals for the rest of their career, and some of them won't. But in the end, what we want to do is give them the skills and the confidence that they can do any of those things, and I hope we will retain some of them into the workforce, because the library's workforce is an aging workforce. So I think 40% of the service is over 55. There's a lot of people taking the opportunity to take not very early, but a bit early retirement through this restructure. Some have been waiting for it for a long time. We want to retain some of that experience. We want to retain people in the service who've been there a long time. We need to be replacing that at the bottom. So Sue, who runs the service, or has done until quite recently, has been at the council since 1971, and she started as a school leaver at 17. But the service hasn't been getting the new Sues in, and that's what we're trying to do with the apprenticeship programme.
Thank you. Councillor Potter and then Councillor Webb.
Sounds like there's lots of very exciting ideas in the new library strategy about how we're adapting, becoming more flexible and adapting, to, new ways of working, etc. I just wondered what your comments would be on the concerns from some staff about health and safety and making sure there is appropriate cover, and what your plan is to address those concerns.
So the minimum staffing numbers haven't changed. The only difference is that the security guards are explicitly included in the health and safety guidance as a minimum staffing numbers, including the security guard. Actually, in practice, quite often the security guards are included anyway at the moment from time to time. And obviously, we're not going to be working, because the security guards in most sites don't start till after the sort of 3 o'clock after school time. But during the day, we won't be working below minimum numbers. So I don't think there will be, obviously, fewer individuals in the service than there are now. But I think that one of the major problems at the moment is that the service is carrying such an unsustainably high level of sick leave. So the current levels of sickness in the library service is 26.1 days per head per annum, which is by far the highest in the council. It's far higher than the manual services like the bins and so on. It's also higher than social care and those other high stress professions. Now, has a lot of issues behind that, but one of those things is a lot of long-term and chronic sickness that's not been managed very well, and people have put in for voluntary redundancy in the past but not been allowed to go, had to kind of limp on when they really would rather have been out of the service. So there's, at the moment, the service is a bit unstable because there are so many people off sick all the time. And part of the other problem is because there's a lot of staff in the service who are scale 4, which means they can't work without a manager present and they can't open and close libraries and they can't cash up. You're always having to move people around, so there's always a scale 5 or a manager on site. Whereas if everybody's at that scale 6 grade and everybody can take that responsibility, you end up with a greater degree of stability in the workforce. I know that our union colleagues do have some concerns about the use of relief staff. I think I mean, the benchmarking we've done across London shows that a lot of library service make use of relief staff. But one of the things I'm really pleased about is a lot of the people who are taking VR, who've got long service, have asked if they can join the relief pool, because that means they can take their retirement, but they can still come back and do shifts, which means that the people coming to cover will be really experienced people. And they're really pleased because it means they can supplement their pensions with a little bit of extra work, but they can also keep that link to the service that they've worked for years and not have to say goodbye to it completely, which I think for some of them is making that wrench a lot easier. It made the decision a lot easier to make. So in terms of the health and safety, we won't go below the minimum staffing levels that corporate health and safety have advised. Those minimum staffing levels are solely about fire evacuation. That's how they work them out. So it's about the layout of the building, the number of floors, how many people you need to get people safely out of the building. We want to train the staff better in order to be able to deal with the few incidents that happen. A lot of our staff are really skilled already at dealing with, you know, I was in Shoreditch Library recently and a character came in who quite obviously had severe mental health problems. The staff clearly knew him well, knew how to cope with it, knew how to deal with it. They dealt with it really well. You see, there's a lot of skill there. We want to make sure that staff feel really well trained, really supported to deal with incidents that might occur. But the other thing is, by bringing more council services into the library, by having more people working out of the libraries, you know, we're at the moment negotiating with adult social care to move the delayed discharge team from the Homerton into some of the spare office space at Homerton Library. Means there'll be lots and lots of council staff coming in and out all the time. So the library staff will be much more supported. They won't be isolated. And I think that will be really important. And having that, you know, everyone who works out of the building will take joint responsibility for it and what happens in it.
Thank you. Councillor Webb. Different point, Chair, just to pick up on what Susan has raised, which is from our young people, the importance of libraries as a place to study and do their schoolwork due to the level of overcrowding. And I'm really glad to see that that point is picked up coming from the Young Futures Commission in our future needs. And so it is acknowledged that the ask from our young, our young students is to extend the library hours, and given constraints and given the issues that we're discussing now, how likely is it that we can look to realistically extending library hours?
What I would like to do is introduce the open libraries model, which means that you can have swipe card access to unstaffed libraries. So, you know, at the moment our libraries are staffed till about 8 o'clock. But what I'd really like to do is put in the technology so that you have an enhanced level of membership, which means that you have a swipe card, which means after 8 o'clock, you can swipe your way into the library and use it till 10 o'clock or midnight or whatever. Now, that would allow us also to have access to all the libraries on Sundays, because at the moment only 3 of them are open on Sundays. So this is done really successfully in other places. The first time I saw it done was in Brighton when I did a corporate peer review there. And I was, you know, Brighton has a lot of the same sort of social issues as Hackney. It has lots of homelessness, drug abuse, and all the things you might worry about in unstaffed spaces. But it's been incredibly successful there, and they've managed to keep their libraries open, I think, or accessible till about midnight across their whole portfolio. And I know Petra has done a lot of work talking to a lot of other libraries that have open libraries. Older people, we were talking about earlier, they love using open libraries in the mornings. So swiping in at about 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, getting a coffee and a newspaper and sitting there with their friends before other people turn up. Teenagers, not so much at 7 a.m., but the older people really like that. So I'd love us to look into that more. At the moment, we're trying to pilot technology at Stamford Hill Library. So we've got a project ongoing where it's literally we're just trying to fit the system, the swipe card, the CCTV, the stuff that you need to make it work safely, just to see if we can make the tech work before we move into how we might go for an operational rollout. But I think in a time of constrained resources where we can't necessarily invest a lot in sort of additional staffing hours, if we can make open libraries work. The other great thing about open libraries is you can allow community groups to have meetings in the evenings after the staff have gone home. You can have effectively, you know, trusted people, trusted groups using the spaces, helps the libraries generate more income. All in all, it's a good thing, but that's down the line a little bit.
Thank you. Sudanaz, you've got your hand up. I'm imagining you'd like to respond to Councillor Webb's question.
Hi, yeah. So hearing about the open library model thing, I'm very happy just because the Sunday, you know, on Sundays libraries are not open, and that was the most infuriating thing for me when I was doing my A-levels last summer. And also libraries need to be much longer for students. I know Hackney Central is until 8 p.m, which is late, but it's not late enough for me because I didn't have that space. And even in university now, my university libraries are not 24/7. So it would be amazing if that was to come through. I just wanted to ask, estimating or like approximately when this could be coming through and how they would be advertising it to Hackney residents, especially those who don't speak English or are ethnic minorities.
Sudanaz, just for clarification, I know this is going to sound really bureaucratic and I apologise for it, but the only people who are really supposed to ask questions tonight aren't councillors. It's all right.
I'm sorry.
It's great that you're enthusiastic about it, and you can definitely ask Polly at another time, but formally speaking, in the business of the meeting, that's not the case. I'm sure Polly will be very happy.
I'll drop you a line about that.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
And I think what's important for the Commission to note is the enthusiasm with which the idea of open libraries was taken up by somebody from the Hackney Young Futures who desperately needs the kind of service that the library service offers. Great. That's really helpful. Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
So my question again is to Polly, and I've got dyslexia, which was actually diagnosed quite late, and I always found libraries quite stressful. So I'm sure it's been covered, but I wondered what the strategy is doing to make libraries more inclusive for those people that have got learning differences and neurodiversity, in terms of the design and the sort of the use of more sort of visual sort of tools to help people with dyslexia, because sometimes sort of a rack of books can be quite scary.
Petra, do you want to answer that? Because you're doing some work on accessible technology, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. So we've created a working group, the library service and the ICT team, and we're looking specifically at accessibility, but also at assistive technology, essentially software that we could use on the PCs and computers, but also looking at things like desk spaces, how to make them more accommodating for people with different needs. And certainly when we redesign our spaces, what we wanted is co-produce the design. So that will also include accessibility. So I'd be really interested to hear from residents with various needs and how we can make the spaces more accessible.
Thank you, Petra. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I've got 1,001 questions, but I will say that having been on the Task and Finish group, I mean, I think this strategy is really ambitious, it's really innovative, and it will improve the service overall, and I was very excited to be a part of it. There's a technical question I'd like to ask, which is, what is the difference between Scale 4 posts and Scale 6 in terms of job security? What's the difference there? Because the unions are saying that Scale 4 there is job security, and Scale 6 I presume not. Is that the case? No.
Yeah, it's not so much about the difference between the jobs, it's the council's organisational change process. So at the moment we have library assistants on Scale 4 and then library supervisors on Scale 5. So what we've done is we've deleted all of those Scale 4 and 5 jobs and replaced them with Scale 6 jobs. Now, the way the council's organisational change process works is that people cannot be directly assimilated to a job that's on a higher grade than the one they're already in. So if people, so then if the job is a higher grade, then they have to apply for that job. Now, so they can't be ring fenced. Well, you ring fenced, I think, if it's one grade up. but you still have to be interviewed. So essentially, people in the service are having to go through a recruitment process
Right.
to get these jobs. And obviously, because of that, we've not been able to guarantee no compulsory redundancies, because there's always a chance, although we'd hope to keep it at an absolute bare minimum, that not everybody might make grade for those Scale 6
Yeah.
jobs.
Thank you. Hang, go on.
But I believe there has been some kind of, support from the council in order to help people do interviews and kind of that kind of thing.
There's been a lot of interview training. We've also offered people one-to-one interview practice and one-to-one interview coaching. There's been, as I said, we've had this co-design of the interview process. It's been simplified to, to the nth degree. So it will be really, really straightforward. The application and interview process has been made as simple as possible. We've given people all the interview questions, with 7 days notice in advance, so they can prepare the answers to the questions. So I think we've really done absolutely everything we can to send a clear message to staff, as we want you to have these jobs. This isn't about trying to get rid of people. This is about trying to give people better jobs for better pay. But the organisational change process does not allow us to give people jobs that are on a higher grade than the one they're on without a process.
Yeah.
Matt would like to come in. Matt, can you take your microphone off, please, Polly, just while Matt speaks? And,
yes, of course,
Councillor
sorry.
Smith.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith, your microphone, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. To answer your question, I mean, knowing that we're within the constraints of our kind of organizational change policy, we wanted to see the proposals designed in such a way that mitigated against or reduced or took away completely the risk of compulsory redundancies entirely, while still allowing the development opportunities. That's why we're putting forward those alternative ideas to offer that. But we didn't get that either in the draft or the final report. And it's only been when we've been getting towards this strike action, we managed to start to see some little give that we're still hopefully negotiating with, might be able to find an outcome. And just as a general point, every manager says we don't want people to lose jobs, and we're very confident they'll make it through the process. We've seen it time and time again. But we've also seen what happens as a result, that some people who don't deserve to lose jobs end up being out. And this is where we need to make sure we take every protection as possibly can. And that includes not just about the process, the recruitment side, but it's about the plans, substantive plans themselves. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question to Polly, actually, about the appetite for voluntary redundancy? Have you got any concerns both about the loss of skills through so many people wanting to take voluntary redundancy, as you say, or indeed the cost for the service?
Well, first of all, in terms of the costs, we don't have a final calculation, but obviously with that number of people leaving, it's going to cost a bit. I think the attitude to finance always with a big VR program in the context of a restructure is that it needs to pay for itself within 2 or 3 years, and we're certainly within that territory easily. It's I think the loss of skills. So there's a lot of people who've asked for VR who have wanted it for a long time. There's been a pent-up demand for VR in the service. So in the last sort of 3 or 4 rounds of corporate voluntary redundancy, there's been a high level of applications from the library service that have been turned down because at the time, because there hadn't been a service redesigned to go with it. They were like, well, we just can't lose all of those people. So we knew that there was a pent-up demand, and a lot of the people choosing to go are some weekend assistants, people who might only work 1 day a week, like that. So I think, yes, there's a concern about the loss of skills and experience. We will be releasing people gradually. So I said at the beginning of this is that people, I think one of the reasons a lot of people apply for VR is because I've made it really clear that we would give it to whoever asked for it. So people have seen it as a really live prospect, whereas in the past, people have put in for VR not being sure whether they got it, and in most cases they haven't. Because I think for a new start for the library service, we want everybody to be working in it, people who really, really want to be there, not just people who are kind of hanging on in there waiting for an opportunity to go. I've talked a lot to some of the people with longer service. They're really keen to, as I say, they're really keen to stay in the relief pool. They're really keen to keep a connection to the service. They're also really keen to stay on for as long as we need them as well. So I don't think we're not going to be letting everybody go all in one go. That wouldn't make sense at all. So lots of people are really flexible, and I've said, look, I'm happy to stick around for as long as you need it, till you've recruited more people, till you've done this, till you've done that. I'm hoping that what we end up with is a really good mix of really experienced people who've learned a lot in the service, been here for a long time, and the opportunity to go out to the community and recruit some new people into the service, not just the apprentices, but fill some vacancies as well. And I think we'll end up with a really good balanced service as a result of that.
Thank you, Polly. Brian, are you answering my question?
Hopefully.
Right.
I just want to say, because the point that Polly was just making with respect to pent-up demand, I mean, if there was that much pent-up demand, when the consultation started, and I remember asking this distinct question in the first week of September to Polly, what happens if 99 people put in for VR, for voluntary redundancy, because you deleted 99 jobs? And the response was, and I can't remember exact word for word, but it was something along the lines of, we'll have to do a lot of new recruitment. Now, what happened in practice, in the first 2 months of the consultation, 14 people put in for voluntary redundancy. Then in the last 4 weeks of the consultation, which was extended by 1 week at our request, it increased from 14 to 44. Why did that happen? Because more and more people realised and recognised that this was not a doable scenario with what was being put forward. That was their, if you like, vote on the strategy that's been put forward in the context of the restructure. We're in favour of all the proposals that are being put forward in general, in terms of the strategy between 22 and 26. But that can only be achieved if you've got enough staff, particularly we've got the knowledge, the skills that has been honed over decades within the service. They've built a network in local communities which is going to be destroyed as a consequence of this proposal. That's something you can't replace. Polly's just referred to gradual release. Well, the thing is, as soon as a redundancy notice is issued, you've got 90 days. That's it. That's not gradual release. As I understand it, once the DPR was signed off, that means effectively it's operable. So that clock is ticking now.
Thanks very much, Brian. I'd just like to remind everybody that we're not here to explore the processes of the consultation. We're here to check to scrutinise the delivery on the strategy. And that does include workforce changes, which is why we're asking these questions. And we're keen to have the points of view of the unions on that. I do want to emphasise to councillors, we're not here to get into the whys and wherefores of the consultation. I'm sorry if that disappoints people, but that is very clear about what we're here for. I'm very keen to take more questions because I think there's a number of ones about flexible spaces, about health and safety, others from commissioners. Can I see some raised hands? Councillor Narcos, Councillor Premier, and then Councillor Potter.
So I've got two questions, if that's all right. The first one is on flexible spaces. So we heard a bit about sort of the changing nature of what people want from libraries and how they're used, but as well as sort of the services that are offered by libraries, they're also just sort of like community infrastructure more generally. So I was just wondering about how kind of the development of these spaces is done in a way that library spaces can be used for other things beyond just sort of library services. So one of the examples we were talking about was sort of using spaces as like vaccine centres if we need to sort of do the pandemic again, I guess you could say. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about that. Shall I do my other question now, or shall I?
Oh, well, yeah, do the other one now as well, so that we've got them both. And then
Yeah, so the other one was about kind of, again, sort of the changing demands of library services and library staff particularly. So we heard a bit about how, what library staff are expected to offer is sort of changing over time. So I was kind of quite keen to hear, particularly from the Unison colleagues over there, just whether you think this sort of strategy, supports staff in having those skills that are required for them in a changing sort of library. And if you have any comment to make around that.
Great. So, Councillor Narcos, first question to Polly then, and the second one to Matt. Is that right?
So in terms of flexible spaces, I think it's really, really important that we try and ensure that the spaces within our libraries can be used in as many different ways as possible. And in some cases, it's as simple as having shelves on wheels that you can push back and clear a space and have it for something else, rather than having fixed infrastructure. We've heard from the Young Futures Commission about how rammed the libraries get during exam times. The study spaces are full, there are kids sitting on the floor. Whereas actually during the rest of the year, when it isn't study time, exam time, those spaces are relatively underused. So trying to, and all of the buildings are different, and they're all problematic in their way. Yeah, some of them are new, some of them are really old, and but trying to design spaces in a way that you can bring in more of one thing and take out more of another, I think is really important, and particularly around that kind of flexible community space as well. Petra's talked about the meeting room that we're hoping to build in Hackney Central Library with some of the Section 106 money we've got approved. One of the other things we're doing, and this sounds really basic, but Stamford Hill Library, we're using some of that Section 106 for a lift in. That opens the whole of the top floor, which because it's not DDA compliant, we can't really use at the moment. So it's bits of investment like that can really, really open spaces up and make them far more flexible. Stoke Newington Library is a really exciting prospect. You know, obviously we're not using the money saved from this restructure to fund capital programs. That's not the way the council's budget works. But the Stoke Newington Library project is a real mark of the council's commitment to libraries. It's a £4.7 million infrastructure project, which will allow us to basically stop a Grade 2 listed building from falling down and hopefully do some aspirational stuff with it. And listening to what our young colleagues were saying about music space, for example, it's a big building, Stoke Newington Library, and I would really love to see it become a specialist music library. It has a fairly extensive sheet music collection, which we'd love to expand. Actually, locked away in Homerton Library is a whole collection of orchestral scores that are just currently not used. We'd like to get all of that in there. We'd like to find a permanent home for Hackney Music Service if we can, with performance space, with practice space and teaching space, as well as the actual library. Now, at the moment, this is kind of lives in not exactly fantasy territory, but definitely in kind of future territory. But that's our vision for what we'd like to do in the future of that building. That potentially could bring in the kind of flexible space you're talking about and our young colleagues were talking about, where people can come into libraries and do some really quite innovative and creative things in those spaces. So within the constraints, and we're also doing a feasibility study on the new library for Stamford, for Woodbury Down, as part of the development there. So we could design in, almost that gives us a chance to design a dream library from scratch rather than having to work with some really quite tricksy old buildings, which would be amazing. But I think that the desire to do this is definitely there. Is there anything I've missed from that, Petra?
No, I think that's very, very comprehensive. I think in terms of opening up spaces, the only thing I would say is that we have to very carefully zone some of these spaces. So, you know, we need to design quiet spaces and busy spaces. And one of the ways that Polly mentioned we will be doing this is by looking at meeting room spaces. But also we want to sort of co-design the space with the people that are going to be using it in their localities. And I think over the next 6 months, we'll be carefully reviewing the footfall in each of our local libraries. For example, we didn't have counters during COVID and the pandemic, so we're going to reintroduce them to see how those spaces are actually being used now post-COVID, so that we can redesign those spaces accordingly to what people need.
Thank you, Petra. Now, Councillor Narcos had a question for Matt and Brian. Go on.
Thank you. Am I able to respond to something very directly that Polly just said earlier?
Well, you've got an opportunity to answer a question that's been posed to you by the Commission. So I think you should focus on that. And then then how you choose to answer that is entirely up to you.
Okay. Well, if I can just quickly point out that in the Hackney Post, a statement from Hackney Council in response to our campaign said reducing the roles will deliver savings but also contribute towards service delivery. This includes the repairs and renovation plan for Stoke Newington Libraries. That's a direct contradiction to what we've just heard just now, but I'll happy to take any further questions.
So Councillor Narcos's question.
I'll try and take up that. I think that was primarily about, do staff have the skills? Well, the beauty of the service at the moment is because of the wide range of numbers of staff that come from a wide variety of different communities, also from a wide variety of different parts of Hackney and wider London as well. It means that where someone might be able to answer a specific question, usually there's someone else that you can refer to who can. In other words, you've got a wide diversity of knowledge that's contained within each current library. Do the maths. There'll be 34 permanent staff on duty. Divide that by 7. Take account of the fact that libraries are open up to 65 hours a week. They only work a 36-hour week. How many staff are going to be on duty? at any one time. Take account of holidays, take account of training, take account of sickness. That's the reality of what we're facing. So unfortunately, the skills will probably decline, or that, if you like, the ability to tap into that skill level from outside. Yes, we're more than open and willing to take on more training, more development. We welcome that. There's probably has been, shall we say, a negative to that over the last period of time. There's almost been an acceptance of standstill within the service, and we accept that that needs to improve. But you don't do that by chopping staff.
Thank you. I think I've got down here some questions about co-design and engagement with staff. Who was going to ask that question? I think it was Gilbert who wanted to ask about the co-design and the engagement with staff on co-design. And you also, both you and Fliss, wanted to ask some questions about post-COVID security and health concerns in terms of ventilation as well as health and safety.
I mean, the kind of co-design with staff goes into sort of drops into that consultation area, Chair, a little bit, I presume, and you didn't really want to speak about the consultation, so anyway. In terms of the sort of welcoming aspect of the libraries, on page 186 of the report, and it's been mentioned by the Young Futures Commission as well. I'll just read a little bit out. It's just from a respondent, one of the COVID-19 responses. The environment in the library has become very hostile. It used to be a friendly place you could just walk into and be welcome, just to browse for books or read for a magazine. Now I get challenged and interrogated at the door. Need to show my library card to even enter, and in general get told off for some minor breach. And it goes on and on and on. And it was mentioned, I think, twice by a couple of the members at the start. So my question here is, how do we ensure that the libraries are welcoming spaces for those young people and they don't experience the kind of hostile environment that this person is relating to? And then just more practical stuff around kind of COVID-19 in terms of ventilation, sort of tactile transmission, because the library is a very tactile space. Issues around safety, ultimately, and a welcoming space for the people coming into the library, visitors, users, everyone else.
Polly?
I'll start and then I'll hand over to Petra. I think certainly during COVID-19, it was a really challenging time. The libraries obviously were shut in the first lockdown, but when they opened again, trying to operate them safely was a huge challenge, and it's a massive testament to Sue, who was running the service then, and actually Ian Holland, who was running the service before he handed it over to me, that they were given a kind of big gold star by Sandra Husbands as Director of Public Health for actually how well they've managed the safety of the environment within the libraries. But it did put a lot of constraints on. So, people having to kind of account for themselves when they walked in and so on. And that was certainly a feature of our pandemic operation. It's not anymore. And I've been spent a lot of time in Hobbiton Library recently, because it's my local library, and I've seen how welcoming it is, and how, I think the only thing that's really still in place from COVID is some of the screens. And it also means that we've been able to open up a lot more of that space again, put the soft furnishings back in that had to be taken out of Dalston Library. So, the libraries feel an awful lot more welcoming now than they did during the pandemic, which I think is a really, really good thing. And it's really quite hard to run infection-proof libraries that still feel like soft and welcoming places, So, so but I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Petra, in terms of.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something around, part of this is all about culture change. So obviously we reviewed the roles of the new workforce structure. We're kind of putting in a professional development program, but I think also it's about developing a workforce plan over the next 6 to 12 months with staff, and that includes really talking to them about the vision, developing standards to ensure that library staff have the skills to meet all the future challenges post-COVID. We're certainly looking towards what Libraries Connected mentioned around encouraging leadership at every level of the workforce, sharing those responsibilities. That's why we've also brought the culture team and the engagement and development team closer together. Certainly library staff will be working with the heritage teams more closely with our museum and with our archive staff, and be able to have more development overall. So what we're planning to do is have, for example, staff away days more regularly, like Polly mentions, and that's where we have to really develop that new culture and how we can really fully engage the workforce, that they have really high levels of morale, and that they feel really equipped to kind of meet some of those challenges.
I think it's also probably worth saying that we're going to be working with Young Hackney, make sure that all of our staff are really well skilled in working with young people, because I think sometimes it's situations with young people aren't very well handled. They can escalate quite quickly. And I think we have had a couple of examples of that sometimes in libraries, but I've also had examples of talking to library staff where they've handled situations so well they just haven't turned into incidents. And and I think that making sure that all the staff in the libraries have got the skills to be able to do that, because sometimes the way young people behave is not at all ill-intentioned, but it needs to be managed well so that it doesn't disturb other library users and all of that stuff. And being able to do that well, I think, is a real skill, and we need to make sure everyone in the service has got it.
Thank you, Polly. I think Councillor Primrose wanted to follow up. Now, hang on, your microphone's not on.
Oh, thanks. And I think Brian was going to come back in, but maybe come back in.
Okay, sorry, Brian, I didn't see your hand. Go on.
Briefly, I mean, there were 3 or 4 different incidents at 4 different libraries last year. We do have that concern on the health and safety side of things with reduced staffing, but we accept the point that libraries should be a welcoming space. Something that can contribute to that is also the design and layout within the library itself. And I would recommend to our members from the Youth Collective that, in particular, to give you an example and to argue and support us on this, if you go to Clapton Library or Shoreditch Library, you'll see a much better layout in general than pertains to some of the other sites. And I think that's something that could be modelled as the other 5 sites in the future. And hopefully that will be taken on board with the redevelopment work at Stoke Newington. The other thing is, there was reference to one, if you like, person who got a bad experience and 1 or 2 bad experiences that was referred to earlier. It's worth stating, this is from the library's own figures, there were visits in 2019 to 2020 of nearly 1.5 million. 1.5 million people come through the door of any workplace. I'll be surprised if every single one of them is going to be satisfied every time they do that. So we have to bear this in mind. In general, I think there's a very high satisfaction level from the majority of users within the library service.
Thank you very much, Brian. Councillor Primrose.
Thank you very much. It was a follow-up question on Councillor Smith about ventilation, because we know that during the early days of COVID, there was so much concentration on touching and washing your hands and so on. But since then, the government have admitted that COVID is and its ongoing aerosol disease, and also we will have further zoonotics. We also want everybody to be healthy going forward. So it's a further question about ventilation, either with current libraries and current library staff, or with the new buildings and the refurbishment of Stoke Newington and other libraries, how we will build in that resilience. I think the needed figure is something like 800 parts per million of carbon dioxide for air exchange, so that it's a healthy place for the staff who will suffer from being frontline staff, but also to make it people feel very safe coming in and welcome back.
And this stuff is a real challenge with a sort of a historic buildings portfolio. So with the refurbishment of Stoke Newington Library, it's something that we'll certainly be talking to the design team about, making sure they design in. And obviously when we, touch wood, if we're able to build this new library at Woodbury Down, then we'll be able to think about all of that stuff. With some of our older buildings, it is a bit more of a challenge. Especially those that are on main roads, because you have windows you can open, but then you have a huge amount of traffic pollution coming in, like Homerton Library. You open the windows there, you get a huge amount of noise from the traffic, and not to mention kind of car fumes and so on. So I think it's quite, and with a building like that was built in the 1970s, it's not in an ideal situation. where we're refurbishing buildings and where we're building a new, we can do something about it. But I think it's an important thing, you're right, to look at right across the library's estate, is what we can do to potentially look forward where we might have, you know, other kind of infectious disease pandemics, what we can do to make the spaces safer and to make sure that we're thinking about that wherever we're spending money on buildings, where we can design in that kind of safety feature if it's possible. And that's certainly something we can add to our kind of, you know, our capital program requirements in libraries in terms of thinking about that formally.
Petra.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, that we're also looking at outdoor spaces. And I think part of that thinking with the outdoor community garden at Stamford Hill was that if, you know, we did have some, God forbid, another pandemic or something, that we can actually have new spaces that are not indoors, that are outdoors. We can keep the libraries open to some extent. And also with the Woodbury Down review, we're currently looking at potentially having a rooftop space, or what we can do to kind of open up the library space and creating these indoor and outdoor spaces to have that better ventilation.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Councillor Potter, Councillor Premaru, I'm just advising you these will be the last two questions because I'm going to wrap it up.
Sorry. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the health and safety, and to both you and Polly, and to you, Matt and Brian as well. Just to you talk, you know, obviously the staff are concerned about health and safety because of changing numbers, and you talked about how you're going to ensure that there is sufficient cover and you'll follow guidance. I just wondered whether we could reassure staff that you will keep that under review and you'll kind of see how it goes, because obviously you'll want to make sure that it's effective and functional, and you won't want to be putting staff in, you know, difficult positions in terms of health and safety. And then any comments that you may have in response to that.
So obviously we'd always keep things under review, and actually at the meeting we had with our trade union colleagues on Friday, Matt asked if we'd be prepared to commit to having an independent externally commissioned review, say a year in, to look at how it was going, and to work with obviously both us and with the staff and with the unions to have a proper independent assessment of how it's working. And I was very, very happy to commit to that, because I think having, you know, there are organisations like Libraries Connected and like other you know, other organisations that work with libraries up and down the country that I think could do that work really well. I think having some external scrutiny, some external challenge and some external support is always a really good thing. So I'd be very, very happy to commit to that. We'll also keep working with our colleagues in corporate health and safety. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, about the first year or so of operation is there's a point next year we're going to be shutting Stoke Newington Library for at least a year to 18 months, which will give us additional staff that we can deploy across the other sites as well. So we do want to use that opportunity to really reach out to the community more, to take the library service out to the community, but that will also give us a little bit of kind of additional capacity.
Have you got anything to answer to Councillor Potter's question? Go on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems we have is that when we have like an incident, which I referred to briefly, and we've had serious incidents that have occurred year on, in each library at different times and at different stages, which have been different scenarios. Management then look retrospectively at what happened, put in temporary countermeasures, then after a month or a couple of months, they're removed and nothing fundamentally changes. So effectively, we are concerned because of this significant reduction in staffing levels, because it is a fact of life that if you've got a staff, if you come into a site of a library, for instance, like Hackney Central, which has got a large floor area, and you've only got 2 members of staff on duty, which could happen under this new structure, and 1 security person, that effectively means that people get lost, things can happen. Before you know it, things have gone wrong. And half the time to, shall we say, quell such a situation, it's better to be on top of it before it occurs. So in other words, we've had incidents between members of the public, we've had incidents between members of the public and staff, we've had all sorts of different scenarios that have unfolded. Unfortunately, there's a rich history of this, as many of us who have lived and worked in Hackney over many decades have witnessed. And that's a fact of life, unfortunately. So I don't think that's been fully taken account of in the way the health and safety has approached this, or the whole health and safety question has been dealt with going into the future.
Thank you. Matt, briefly, because I've got one more question, and that's the final question.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength, Councillor Potter, because that's what, yeah, exactly why we asked as part of the negotiations for some sort of review to look at, is this working in 6 or 12 months or beyond? And fully engage with all the staff and the unions alike. And look, let's have a look at evidence to see, have health and safety incidents reduced? Has relief usage been reduced? That sort of thing. I mean, but what we don't want to see is if that isn't the case and there is evidence, that brush on the carpet, but also we're fearful about what we're losing people now. We might not get them back in 12 months' time or be able to replicate that overnight. You can't lose that skills, knowledge, and experience just like that. I mean, the impact is immediate.
Thank you very much, Matt. One final question from you, Councillor Primoe, and then this section of the meeting will be finished once we've got.
Thank you very much. It's around digital provision and digital inclusion and skills needed and the staffing levels too, and also a question to Polly about when you are trying to keep experienced staff, are they actually allowed to return after taking VS as relief staff? So I thought that was not possible for a couple of years according to the programme. In terms of the digital provision, we know that we need to be far more on this, and there are developments all the time, and that's absolutely fantastic, great programme setting here. In terms of digital inclusion, we know that a lot of people come in who do need a lot of attention, and I think that was evident in the previous Library Cadet report as well about working with people. So the question around inclusion is it adequate? Are there adequate skills? Do we need to reskill people to do this? And are there adequate staffing levels in order to make sure that everybody is included in terms of IT and the digital divide and using Wi-Fi, for example, where they cannot use it at home? Thanks.
Do you want to leave your microphone on, please, Polly? It's all right. I was remembering to switch it off and then forgetting to switch it back on again. So just the first technical point about, can people who've taken voluntary redundancy come back for the relief pool? Yes, they can, because it's a different kind of contract of employment. And so we, what happened is at the beginning of the consultation, a couple of people who wanted to take VR said, if I take VR, can I stay? Because we've got quite a few people in the council, in the service, who have permanent contracts, but they also have relief contracts. So they do the permanent job, but they also do extra shifts. And so people saying, can I take VR from my permanent contract, but keep my relief contract? And the HR advice was, yes, you could. So other people started piping up, well, if I take VR, can I join the relief rota? And so HR said, yes, you can, as long as anyone who wants to do that says so by this date. And that was very attractive to a number of people because it meant they could go without quite going. Which is a really nice thing. So that's something that is quite almost, it's unique to libraries really, because it's like we've got people from across the council who, like, say, work in housing but in the library's relief pool as well. So we've got quite a lot of that going on, which is really good actually. In terms of the digital work, that's definitely Petra's area of expertise, so I'll hand over. Petra.
Yeah, thank you. So this is part of the digital transformation work that we started about 10 months ago with the ICT team. And obviously we had to really focus on the core infrastructure to start with, because we need fast Wi-Fi for all our residents, whether they want to kind of access very basic or higher end resources in the libraries. But I think it's really also important that we train up our library staff. And I think the question is very valid around, what would that training look like? Well, first of all, I think we need to kind of make sure that everyone has the basic digital skills. So we're just working up a training program with the ICT team, and we're probably going to follow this up with a survey to all staff to see what skills we have at the moment. And then we're going to go through the sort of higher end skills, because there are things that we probably need in the future in libraries, like cloud printing, printing from your mobile phone straight onto the library's printer. These are the sort of things that we can teach residents very easily once we know how to do this. The other thing to say is that staff are currently involved working with digital inclusion in a way that they have small groups of people coming into the library and testing different models. So one of the models we're currently testing is working with the Hackney Pensioners Convention. It's a group of older residents that have come into the library and have said to us, we would like to design posters. And so library staff said, well, we have some existing software like design software that we can teach you how to use, so you can design your own posters, and I've put a little bit of budget towards it so they can print them off as well. That really helps a charity, a small charity that would like to kind of produce marketing and stay in touch with their residents and with their club members, etc. So those are just a couple of things that we're currently designing, but I think training for residents and for staff needs to go hand in hand.
Thank you very much, Petra. And that comes to the end. That concludes this particular part of the meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions. This has been extraordinarily helpful for us as a commission to understand what it means for the delivery of the service, and made us very aware of some of the challenges facing the administration in terms of managing, reducing budgets, increasing needs, and changing needs over a period of time. It was also particularly helpful to hear from our union colleagues about the concerns that you have for the staffing of the service, and also what it means for your members. And we will take that into consideration when making our recommendations about what we think what might be the risks around the delivery on the strategy. And we are also pleased to hear that there continue to be conversations between the unions and the administration about how to resolve some of the ongoing concerns that there are, particularly in relation to reviewing after a year around health and safety. So thank you everybody again. We have other bits of the meeting to complete, so if we will absolutely not mind and not be offended if you want to make your way to your warm and cozy abodes rather than sit here a little bit longer. I have the minutes of the previous meeting to approve from the Commission. Are we happy to approve the minutes from the previous meeting? To follow, so we just don't have anything to worry about this time. Sorry, I thought it's because you know what it was. It's because there's so much paperwork. I thought the minutes must have been in there. Right. Okay. So then the next thing we have to do is look at the work programme, which is on page 361. Just a reminder of quite how much documentation we have today. Page 361. It's just after the blue pages. This is our work programme. On upcoming, you can see June before, July before, and then we move through to where we are now, where we've got the libraries thing and libraries inquiry, and then next month on the 6th of February we have cabinet member question time with Councillor Nicholson on community wealth building and the green and circular economy. We're still sticking with both of those, are we? As far as we know. Are we comfortable with that as the agenda, as broadly the subject matter for next month's meeting? Yeah? Good. And yeah.
Sorry, it's a bit previous because I did write. I've only just written to say to propose something and see how that might fit into either one of those or a sub-strategy, which we were talking before about the jobs, skills and circular economy. And I don't know whether you're familiar with the GLA Ray London report. I think it was published June 2022, which looks like an excellent report to maybe invite a speaker into scrutinise, but we could also speak about that.
Specifically, what's the report on, the Ray London report?
It's new jobs and skills in the circular economy. It's the GLA report.
Right.
I'm looking at kind of about 285, up to 280,000 jobs London-wide.
Yeah.
By 2030, but it looks like there's a lot of interesting detail in that. I can't say I've read all the detail. I've read the main report, and there's much more granular things that I think would be useful for possibly this commission or for something to us take offline to have a look at.
Yeah, we'll have a look at it, see if we can put it in the pack or whether we've got space to take evidence. I'm aware that we really do need to scrutinise the council themselves on this area, because we want to be able to really get into what exactly their plans are, and that's at the moment that's where the focus is of the agenda. But let's have a look at it and see whether it fits in, because it may well be something that what we want to do is bring it in and say, well, what have you considered the consequences of the implications are of the report, when asking them check whether they've read it. Councillor Potter.
Just thinking that paper sounds quite wide. I know we're doing green skill, we're doing skills.
Yeah, we're doing another one, aren't we?
So maybe there'll be elements of it.
We could bring questions with both sections.
Well, yeah, the green skills one is in April, so it might be. Yeah, so we've got community wealth building, green circular economy, and the economic development plan. So the 6th of February is really busy, isn't it? We're moving that to March. So, okay, so the stuff with Michael Toyer, is that right? And Stephen Haynes, that will go to March, and that will be added to the cabinet member question time with Councillor Coban on the new Green Deal and the climate action plan. And then the 25th will be Carol on green skills and adult learning. So that might be where the circular economy stuff fits in, the Ray London thing. Does that look all right? I mean, there might be things that in terms of rapid response we might want to slot in, but I'm particularly keen that we get through this if we can in the next few months. Is there anything that is pressing that you would like to propose?
Does that include retrofitting? Chatting about that?
Well, do you know what? We'll find out. Because I don't hold the content of the administration's new Green Deal in my head at 9 o'clock on a Monday night. So I suggest that might be a question for, well, we'll secure the remit and then get on with it. Yeah, but yeah. Anything else? Right. Okay. Well, then we're quite happy with that. Do we have any other business? Then, if there's no other business, I can formally declare this meeting closed.